Good morning, everybody. Thank you all for not letting this soggy weather deter you from coming out this morning. My name is John Seidel. I'm the Executive Director and CEO of Historic St. Mary's City. And here at the city, we try to make things exciting, but crossing the Everglades to get here this morning was not in our plan, so we apologize. Our intent this morning was actually to have the first part of this event out in the tent that is out there, and then to do a ceremonial unlocking of the chapel done with Sheriff Hall, and that would be followed by the big reveal where we would show you the interior of this magnificent space. Late yesterday, we realized it was a veritable swamp out there, and we did not want to subject you to that, so for your comfort, we elected to switch gears and move things inside. So this is turning out to work wonderfully well, and I hope you're much more comfortable in here than you would have been out there in the mud. Sheriff Hall, I'm very sorry that we weren't able to do that great unlocking. That scene of unlocking the door was intended not only as a surprise unveiling, but as a way to highlight the fact that your department is the first police force in the colony and state of Maryland, one of the first in the nation as well, and we thank you for your service and that of your colleagues. So, while things are not quite as we envision, the important thing is that all of you are here. We're very grateful for that, so welcome. Today marks the culmination of an important phase of St. Mary's City's Liberty of Conscience interpretive program, which started with intensive historical and archaeological research over 40 years ago. If you're not sure what liberty of conscience really is or means, don't worry, you're going to hear plenty about it today. The interior of this chapel is finally complete. And we also will have a homecoming ceremony in September that we hope you'll join us for the reinterment of the burials that were recovered during the excavations and in the lead coffin project. Still to come on this site are a couple of other things. Eventually we'll have a delineation of the burial ground outside of this building. We'll also have a new interpretive exhibit inside what is now a ghost frame over here to the right of the building as you exit. That will become a fully clad building with state-of-the-art exhibitions inside of it. But today is a major milestone, and it's a homecoming in its own right, with many of the scholars, experts, and donors who helped to investigate and then to rebuild this chapel joining us for this event. It's an opportunity for us to celebrate their marvelous work, and it is an opportunity for them to share their stories with us this morning and this afternoon. Before we start, however, I'd like to ask you all to rise and invite Father Ron Anton of the Columbier Jesuit community in Baltimore to lead us in an invocation. Father Anton?
Good and gracious God, we gather mindful that we do so in your presence in this very site where religious freedom found its roots and spread throughout our nation. Gracious God, aboard the ark, on his way to the new world, your servant, Father Andrew White, wrote, "The first and most important design of the most illustrious Baron, which also ought to be the aim of the rest who go on this same ship, is not to think so much of planting fruits and trees in the land so plentiful, as of sowing the seeds of religion and piety." End of quote. God of all creation, you call on all humankind to be co-creators with you and to participate in your work of making a world of justice and love by continuing to sow seeds of religion and piety in this new world that we so cherish. Help us to realize that the work started by the first settlers in this church, dedicated to the Virgin Mary, to make a land where justice flowered and love blossomed, is now handed on to us. May we now, by your grace, continue the work of religious freedom, of respect for the dignity of every individual, and tolerance of all people, which they started here. To you be glory and honor now and forever. Amen.
Thank you, Father Anton. A moment ago, I spoke about the notion of liberty of conscience. Today, we would call that religious freedom, or perhaps the separation of church and state. And I think that from our 21st century vantage point, it's very easy to forget sometimes how novel, indeed how radical an idea this truly was in the 17th century when Maryland was founded. That period was rife with religious conflict. In England, the orthodoxy was Protestantism of the Church of England, and it was actually illegal to practice other religions, including Catholicism. The Crown certainly would not have sanctioned the building of a Catholic church or a chapel like this anywhere in its dominions, except here, except in Maryland. And that was because of this radical notion of the Calverts, the Lords Proprietor of Maryland, that people in this colony should be allowed to worship whatever brand of Christianity they chose. And this was the concept of liberty of conscience. It was the idea that you should be able to follow your conscience and worship as you choose. And it's an enduring American value, but often one that we seem to struggle with. It disappeared at the end of the 17th century when the capital was moved to Annapolis, not to reappear until just after the American Revolution when it was enshrined in our Constitution. Yet, despite that, even today we have debates about the notion, about the role of religion in our founding, and about the place of religion in today's government and public institutions. And we even see these debates today when we talk about how a museum such as ours should interpret the role of religion and should interpret a space like this. I've heard people say that reconstructing this chapel simply reinforces the misconception that Maryland was primarily a Catholic colony. The counterpoint, of course, is that the very existence of this chapel drives home the unique and important idea of freedom of religion, because this structure truly could not have been built anywhere else in the English-speaking world at this time. There was even an internal debate here at Historic St. Mary's City over the painting that you see over the altar, and debate over whether or not we should even replicate the altar itself. One school of thought was that this interior should be empty so as not to put off people of other faiths or to make them feel uncomfortable. And while we respect that, we just don't think that would be true to our mission, which is to reflect the period that we interpret as accurately as we possibly can, based on the best possible evidence. We try not to shy away from difficult or uncomfortable topics, because really the only way to truly understand our shared past is to confront it in all of its complexity. I just don't know how it would be possible to accurately replicate a chapel in a city called St. Mary's, in a colony and state called Maryland, without acknowledging that this chapel almost certainly would have been dedicated to Mary as well, and that it would have borne her likeness above the altar. Throughout the Jesuit world, churches and chapels of this period shared traits that you see in here. Light dominates the design of these churches. The focal point is the altar, what some would call a scene for sacred theater. And as historians, as archaeologists, as museum professionals, we just don't believe that this reconstruction would be complete without them. But we will let you determine the impact of this space and its newly completed interior. You're going to hear a lot today about the historical research and the archaeology that underpins this reconstruction. It's been a 40-year project, which is hard to comprehend, but it speaks to the longevity of this alliance between history and archaeology that is at work here at Historic St. Mary's City, and it demonstrates, I think, the real power of such dedicated long-term research. Too often what we see are projects that last a couple of years and then they move on to another topic. Here it has been sustained since the late 1960s. But this place is also a testament to the vision of one person above all others, and that's Dr. Henry Miller. Henry started his professional career here. He worked tirelessly as the Director of Research and Collections at Historic St. Mary's City. He's now a Senior Research Fellow, and it's Henry who has championed this project from the beginning and who completed so much of the painstaking work that made it possible. It's truly remarkable scholarship. So we're not only celebrating this reopening today, but we're celebrating Dr. Miller and his vision and his tenacity. So it's my great pleasure to ask Dr. Miller to come up and share some thoughts with us. Henry?
Well, thank you. Very good. And it's an honor to have all of you with us today. This is an auspicious event, and it's taken a heck of a long time to get here. Okay. A lot of people have had an involvement over here, hundreds, thousands even, if you look back on it. And I would like to begin by sort of recognizing the individuals that did so much to make this a reality. First, we want to begin by recognizing the family that protected and cared for this site and others in St. Mary's City, keeping them from being destroyed by development. That family is the Howards and ancestors of the Brooms. Today, Tom Howard Jr. and his sister Marguerite Morrison are with us, and we thank you for those years of care and concern. The current chapel story begins 42 years ago. At that time, local citizens began a grassroots effort to have the old chapel site located and marked in some way for Maryland's 350th anniversary. Leaders of that was Fred and Beth McCoy. They raised over $10,000 from local citizens. Now, in 1983, that was good money, okay. Fred and Beth have passed on, but their daughter, Margaret Badukowitz, is here today, who has also devoted much labor to making this a reality. Muffin, thank you. So they raise the money. Then the task begins, how do we find the site? That job fell to Dr. Gary Wheeler Stone. Gary is truly the father of St. Mary's City archaeology. He began it, laid out the procedures, discovered the St. John's site, Van Swearingen site, and taught us, importantly, how do you decipher the remains of a long-vanished building? Gary taught us that, and he has been a critical person involved with us starting the project. They found it, we marked it out, and I would like to say that Gary has had probably the most important role. I'm sorry, John, but I think Gary's had a major role in this place. Gary, thank you. Okay. Yeah. And amazingly enough, two of the crew who actually did that work in the summer of 1983 are with us. It is Joe Anderson and Jane Kostinko, both here. Thank you, gentlemen and ladies. In 1988, exactly 50 years after Henry Chanley Foreman discovered this site, our museum decided that it was time to spend some effort learning what this building was like. With Dr. Timothy Reardon, Silas Hurry, our curator, and myself, we planned it out and began the excavations. Tim supervised that digging, and he is with us right here today. Thank you, Tim. And the thousands and thousands of artifacts we found were processed by our curator, Silas Hurry. He unfortunately can't be here today, or this morning at least. But we figured all out from these little clues about what this building looked like, because there was no records. But digging at the chapel also encountered, you won't be surprised to learn, human remains. And we knew that if we reconstructed the building, it was going to damage some of those. So we led an excavation to about 65 or so individuals, besides the lead coffin people right over here. This was the first systematic investigation of colonial graves in the Chesapeake region, and Dr. Reardon led this work, developing new methods that are now widely used in burial excavations. From the beginning, we have been greatly assisted by Dr. Douglas Owsley of the Smithsonian in deciphering the stories that these people have that are written in their bones. Internationally recognized as an expert on the human skeleton, he is a wonderful colleague of ours, and this afternoon, Dr. Reardon and Dr. Owsley are going to reveal what they have found in that session. Fascinating information. So the digging produced lots of insights, lots of clues, but how do you put them together? Well, we needed advice. And we had debates there about what was going on, and we just couldn't come to a conclusion. And then by absolute good fortune, fate, I would argue, Dr. Thomas Lucas came to us. Tom is an expert, a Jesuit. He's an expert on Jesuit architecture and history. And he became our go-to guy when critical questions about this, other aspects of this building came up. He's going to be speaking this afternoon, but a pivotal person is Dr. Tom Lucas. Thank you, Tom. So we had the good information, we had that data, but we needed some architects to take all of our information and convert it into a reconstruction. We were fortunate to hire John Mesick and Jeffrey Baker of Albany, New York architectural firm. They've done historic buildings all over the country. Unfortunately, they cannot be here today, but I wanted to acknowledge their presence. Well, the planning was coming along well. We had architectural plans, but something was missing. Money. So the St. Mary's City Foundation took on the task of fundraising. Initially, that was led by the late Gene Chandler. And the first major donation of $50,000 came from a local physician, Dr. Patrick Jarboe, and his wife, Margaret. Now, I don't know if Margaret's with us today. She was going to be, but I want to acknowledge them. And also, former director of St. Mary's City, Polly Barber, gave a significant amount of funds, and she's represented by our daughter, Beth Clark, and Mary Barber, I believe. So Beth, thank you, and Mary, okay, for that contribution. But any successful campaign needs a booster. And ours came to us in a very unusual manner, through the discovery of lead coffins, right over here. That produced international recognition of St. Mary's City. And William Donald Schaefer, our governor at the time, understood the importance of St. Mary's, and he appointed the legendary editor of the Washington Post, Ben Bradley, to be the chair. And Ben became the head of the St. Mary's City Commission. He took up the campaign with his characteristic gusto and started working away. He contacted people. He got Walter Cronkite to narrate our campaign film, for example. And he and his wife, Sally, donated the largest private sum of anyone to make this chapel happen. And today, Sally Quinn and their son, Quinn Bradley, are, I believe, with us. Are you here? Maybe not, but they're supposed to be. We will see. But Ben made a big view. Other groups, such as the Society of the Ark and Dove and the Pilgrims of St. Mary's, also made very substantial contributions. And Morris Murray, the governor of the Ark and Dove Society, is to be here as well, somewhere. There he is. Hi, Morris. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you, Morris. Okay. Over 1,000 people gave their money to make this possible. It was truly a major event. And some of the people, locals, who gave a whole lot of money was the late Judy Rayleigh, represented by her daughter, Betty Woodburn, here today. Betty, thank you. And another special donor who lives nearby and is a pillar of our community, Loretta Tiny Taylor, and her husband Francis gave lots of money. Yes, thank you. The largest sum of cash came from the Save America's Treasure program of the National Park Service. And for that, we must thank Congressman Steny Hoyer, who arranged it. And he couldn't be with us today, unfortunately, but Steny really made that big effort. So getting a design and the money is one thing, but who is actually going to build it? That is something we had to address, and by good fortune, one of the best brick masons in America was recommended to us, and we were able to hire Jimmy Price. Jimmy is an expert in masonry. He's worked at significant buildings, like the White House, things like that, a major expert. He brought a wealth of knowledge, experience, and amazing work ethic to the project. And he did it all in the old-fashioned way. No modern materials. We did it like the 17th century people would do because we wanted it to be an experimental archaeology project. How long would it have taken them to do this back 350 years ago? So Jimmy made it all happen, and just his experience and knowledge was remarkable, and I want to recognize his huge contributions. Jimmy, thank you, sir. Okay. But sometimes there's other people you don't know too well or hear about as much. Some of them which this architecture would never have been finished. And that is retired Navy Captain Roger Hill. Now, Roger was our deputy director at the time. He administered this overall effort, solved problems, handled the bureaucracy, and kept the crew paid. But when funds ran short, Roger personally loaned large quantities of cash to this project to keep the mortar mixers a-mixin' and the bricklayers a-layin'. Not everybody would make that sacrifice, but he did it, and he also gave a lot of money. So Roger Hill deserves another big credit for it. Where's Roger? Okay. And there's many others, of course. The first brick was laid by Jimmy in the summer of 2004, and work proceeded each summer afterwards. Finally, in 2009, this building itself was completed. The late Pete Himmelhaber helped us. He was our tour guide par excellence, but he blacksmithed that iron cross on the top of this building. It's a copy of one at Georgetown University, according to legend, may have been on top of the original chapel here. Also helped with mounting the door. And an amazing artisan, a friend of mine, the late Peter Rivers, helped put the lock on the door, put every pane of glass in this building. These are some of the unsung heroes that deserve our recognition. Yeah. So anyway, we opened the building in 2009, but it was a shell. It lacked the core for which it was originally built, which is this, the altar. It was an unfortunate long delay of over a decade before anything happened, but finally in 2001, things began to move. I was able to complete the plan of the interior, and funding came from private sources and the State Department of General Services. As last in 2023, there was real movement. The state hired an architectural consultant in Towson who helped us, Dakota Ash. He provided important data. But to build it required a different group of specialists, people who could replicate 17th century furniture and carvings. After bidding, we hired the Southern Maryland firm of S.E. Davis, run by Susan Davis and her sister Lisa Holmes. They provided an immense amount of work. Their site director, Mike Johnson, is a genius at solving problems in the middle of the effort there. And I don't know if they're here today, but they gave us far more than the contract had. They went above and aboard, and they made this happen on the shortest deadline anybody should work with. It really occurred here. So thank you to S.E. Davis, wherever you are. There's Sue. Stand up, Sue. Sue Davis. Thank you. And there's Dakota. Thank you. Good, Dakota. Thank you. Very good. Okay, so that came on. They did a great job. They got it done. We had at least 12 hours of leisure between yesterday and here. But there was something they didn't do, and that was the tabernacle. Okay. The reason is that the Society of Colonial Wars of the Maryland chapter donated funds to reconstruct the tabernacle. And Alfred Gundry, the governor, and Peter Paris, Special Projects Chair, guided that effort. I don't know if they're with us today or not. If so, stand up, please. There. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Yeah, good. Very good. So to do it, we hired Tom Brown, Woodwright, the finest wood carver in the state of Maryland, in my humble opinion. And his a support person who was the carver and the gilder, Jim Brewer. They did a grand job of producing that beautiful tabernacle, a copy of the original that was on the altar in this building in the 17th century. Finally, Father Ron Anton, who gave us the invocation, found funds for the altar painting here. And Jeannie Posnett, who is with us, did the beautiful altar cloth put on this morning. Okay. So thank you, Errol. Yeah. So this has been a labor of love, a project with deep community support, of interest to many. But why did we do it? What is the purpose of this? Dr. Seidel mentioned a little bit of that, but the answer really is twofold. First, this is the founding site of one of America's largest religious groups, the Catholic Church. From the small seeds of faith planted here in the 1630s, they grew into a faith community, then thrived, but then suffered decades of intense persecution in the 18th century. But it was that surviving community that led to the official founding of the Catholic Church in the United States, with the Diocese of Baltimore established in 1790. And the very first bishop, John Carroll, was a Marylander, and his ancestors actually worshiped in this building. And the current head of the Primal See, the beginning church diocese in America, we're great to have us with us, who is His Excellency Archbishop William Lori. Thank you. And I would also say that the Archdiocese of Washington that we're now a part of is represented by His Excellency Bishop Roy Campbell. Thank you, Bishop. So, the first church here was built by a man many of you have heard of, Father Andrew White, the Apostle of Maryland, as he had been called. That church was a wooden building, and we discovered that it stood right here. It didn't survive because in 1645, Protestant privateers attacked Maryland and they burned that building to the ground there. They also took Father White and his cousin, Father Copley, prisoners, put them in chains in the hold of the ship, interestingly called the Reformation, and took them back to England in chains. The 4 other priests who were in the colony at the time were apparently captured, but then they disappear from history. We suspect that they were dropped off along the uninhabited shores of the Chesapeake in January, where they died of exposure. They really should be considered martyrs in their own right. And I personally strongly believe that the exceptional holiness of the Apostle of Maryland, as noted by all his contemporaries, merits the beginning of his examination of him for sainthood, because he is a very important figure. The later brick chapel is the first permanent Catholic structure in English America. It was the main church for Maryland's Catholic community, and it was the first brick building in Maryland. For a time and place, it was a really significant achievement. I mean, this was not, everybody else was living in wood buildings. This thing stood out in an amazing way here, and that was intentional. But the effort was really huge. We don't know exactly what money was available. There's no records, but clearly it was a costly undertaking here. If you had money, the floor you're sitting on, 14 tons of rock was brought from Europe just for the floor. So what about the rest of this? Our only real clue is the tabernacle that survived, about the ornate and beauty of the interior of this building. So they were building a structure that they wanted to last for generations. It was the Mother Church of Maryland, dedicated to the Blessed Mother. As the founding site of a major religion in the United States, this is clearly a place of national significance. But there was another equally important dimension to this story. These churches could not have been built anywhere else in the entire English-speaking world. Why? Freestanding churches were forbidden by law. Catholics could not have churches. This imposing brick building was only possible because of Maryland's unique religious policy. Cecil Calvert Lord, Baltimore, created something that was called the Maryland Design that would offer a new approach to religion. He consistently championed liberty of conscience over and over again and argued for the free exercise of religion. To achieve these, he knew an established or official state religion would make that impossible. So therefore, he came up with a policy of non-establishment, no state church. Now, sometimes this is called separation of church and state, but what it really meant in the 17th century, and 18th even, is that no established church having that meant the government could not dictate to citizens what their thoughts and what their religious beliefs should be. This is a critical component, the basis of human rights, and it was a very radical idea at the time. It is widely believed that at the time that unity of religion was essential. If you didn't have unity, everybody believing the same, you couldn't have peace and prosperity. Furthermore, the state had a right and a duty to defend the true religion. And it was impossible to separate politics and religion at this time. Everybody widely believed that. But the Maryland Design rejected these. And due to these policies, it became a religiously diverse society. There were Catholics, yes, but many Anglicans, Puritans, Anabaptists, Presbyterians, Quakers, Lutherans, and other groups in Maryland. It was a very rare society at this time period. Strong evidence of its success comes from an unusual source, a private letter we were excited to find. This letter is written by a Maryland immigrant named Matthew Hill. He was a Presbyterian minister, and he wrote to a friend in England in the year 1669. And in it he said, I quote, "We enjoy a great deal of liberty, and particularly in matters of religion," unquote. That is from a source I wouldn't have expected to hear how this was successful at the time, an important thing. So this building is a physical symbol of that effort to bring religious liberty to America. Early Maryland introduced as official policies liberty of conscience, the free exercise of religion, and no established church to this continent. These may sound familiar to us because 150 years later, they became the opening section of the First Amendment of the Constitution, reading, "Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof." These were introduced by Maryland in the early 17th century. So why, let me ask you, why? When we talk about religious freedom, people immediately think about the Pilgrims of Plymouth. Now, they did believe in religious freedom for themselves, nobody else, okay? Or we talk about William Penn, who did actually do that 50 years later. But if you look at the textbooks, historical studies, even popular imagination, Maryland has no place. It's simply not there. And yet we know what they achieved here. And in part, this is because no documents from the Calverts explicitly saying what they were planning and what their thoughts were survive. We have to infer from what they did and from some legal records and a few letters that we have of them. So unlike William Penn, who left thousands of pages written there. But also, there's another big reason. Dr. John Krugler, who's really the Calvert scholar, pointed out that long anti-Catholic bias in American historiography was another factor. And this was even recognized 200 years ago by a Protestant named James Wilson. He was a Pennsylvania lawyer who played a key role in the American Revolution worked with James Madison directly to write the U.S. Constitution and was on the first Supreme Court. In his examination of history, he was surprised to find that what had been, he was surprised to find what had actually been done in early Maryland, and even more surprised that it was totally unrecognized. He wrote, making his observations, that there is an ungracious silence prevailing about Lord Baltimore and early Maryland. In some ways, that continues today. Therefore, I would like to proclaim to you that that 2025 is the year that we begin to shatter that ungraceful silence. We're going to make it happen. This building right here, in a substantive way, begins that process. And soon, as Dr. Seidel mentioned, we're going to have the Liberty of Conscience exhibit gallery rebuilt over here that will help tell the story about all Marylanders and what happened here. That is going to be, this building and that are going to be a grand start. But there's one more thing you do not know about, and this is significant. Right now, there is in production a major movie. Okay? It was conceived by Mark Letzer, who is right here with us. Mark, thank you for this idea. Okay? It is being directed by the award-winning filmmaker Drew Perkins, and it is entitled Liberty of Conscience: The Founding of Maryland. It is a beautiful film. I'm reviewing snippets of it, and it is going to go national and internationally. The premiere will be in England in June. We'll see it a little bit later. It is the second pillar of this shattering the ungracious silence here. So thank y'all for creating this and working on it. Maryland's experiment in religious freedom only lasted about 60 years. But for those years, it was a surprising success in a world opposed to such liberties. Please help us to tell this story, because it truly is of national and even international significance, and as relevant to our times as it was in the 17th century. This is an important movement to share the beginnings of human rights and tell how Maryland contributed to them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Miller. I think you can understand how his enthusiasm has helped keep this project alive and bring it to this wonderful conclusion here. We have a number of other speakers that we would like to introduce. Congressman Steny Hoyer has been a stalwart supporter of historic St. Mary's City since the beginning, and as Dr. Miller mentioned, he was instrumental in securing significant funding for this project. He wanted to be here with us this morning, but was unable to do so, and in his place, we have Demisha Proctor, who has a citation to present.
Hello, my name is Denisha Proctor. I'm a constituent liaison from Congressman Hoyer's office. Congressman Hoyer regrets that he cannot be here with you all today, but he sent me with a greeting. Dear attendees, it is with great pride and enthusiasm that I congratulate you on the opening of the Construction Brick Chapel exhibition at historic St. Mary's City. This event is a wonderful opportunity to highlight and celebrate the rich history of Southern Maryland, and an event that has been decades in the making. To the attendees, I want to thank you for your dedication to the mission that is engaging the public with Maryland's history and archaeology. The Brick Chapel at St. Mary's City stands as a powerful reminder of faith, perseverance, and early American values. I also want to thank dignitaries and key speakers today, providing in-depth insight to the chapel's significance, history, and construction. I wish you all the best for an enjoyable and educational event as you celebrate this historic occasion, and I send my wholehearted support as you continue to advance the ongoing mission of Historic St. Mary's City to preserve its rich past. With kindest regards, I am sincerely yours, Steny Hoyer.
Thank you, Denisha. And Congressman Hoyer, we thank you in absentia. Your support has really been remarkable. I'd also like to introduce Admiral Tim Healy, who is chair of the Historic St. Mary's City Commission. He has both some remarks and a citation to read as well.
Good morning. Thank you all for coming here. As he said, I am the chair of the Historic St. Mary's City Commission. We have a few commissioners in the audience. I can't see that well, but if you could raise your hands. There, Judy. Thank you. So I decided to hit this from a little different angle than you've heard. Not as long as Henry, longer than others. But in the mid to late 20th century, there's an author named James Michener, and he wrote a lot of books. And when I say books, I mean books. They're like 1,000-page books, and he researched books for years. And they started out, it's kind of formulaic after a while. The first couple chapters would be about the lava forming and the germs and stuff, and he slowly would get into stories. And he wrote books like Hawaii and the Chesapeake, Texas, other ones. But the one that stuck with me, and I read this probably about 50 years ago, I just thought about this last night, was this book called The Source. And the story is, it ends up being about modern day Israel, but the gist of the story is that lightning struck a tree back, I may have this wrong, but this is the way I like to remember it, struck a tree back in prehistoric times, caught it on fire, and the people just thought that was like a sign from something. It was a holy spot, and they just ended up, that became a place where good things would happen. And the gist of the story is that every generation and every succeeding group of people, the Romans, the Greeks, other people came, and they all knew there was like a sort of a holy place. And they went through their whole lives and survived it, but that was important to them to know that there was something bigger than just them. So I remember at the time, it kind of lit a spark into me, like, this archaeology stuff could be kind of fun. And then when I found out you had to lay on your back in the summer digging up stuff, I thought, I'll fly jets off of carriers. That'll be more fun. But it stuck with me, and now I'm back here in this group watching our archaeologists and other people work the same thing. It reminded me that this is probably very similar to that idea. The colonists weren't the first people here, as we know. There have been people here, we think 10, 12,000 years beforehand. And they weren't all one people. They're people that evolved and people came in and took over. But they all, I mean, and I guess in real estate agent talk, it was location. So we had flat land, we had fresh water, we had access to the sea, we had enough food to go around. And so people kept that. They lived a tough life, but they still had a faith thing going, and they still had something that was important to them to say there's something more than just day-to-day living. And I think that's what this chapel represents, as well as the whole thing about St. Mary's City is even the toughest times, and they were tough. I was hoping I could say that the Protestants and Catholics both shared this chapel, but I talked to a couple really smart people and they said, nah, that never happened. The two groups are so split that would never come together. But I like to think maybe someone snuck in here, from the other faith to make it. But it's just important to me to show that has always been a critical part of this city and this state of making sure faith is part of our daily life. So thanks for all of you for showing up, and this is just a beautiful place. So I need to get to read a citation from the governor. I'm trying real hard. Oh. The state of Maryland, governor of the state of Maryland, I give up. I could be an archaeologist now. The governor of the state of Maryland To Historic St. Mary's City Commission opening of 1660s chapel exhibit, greetings. Be it known, because of your demonstration of high integrity and ability, meriting our great trust and respect, we are most pleased to award you the Governor's Citation in appreciation of your outstanding services to the citizens of this state, and signed by the Governor, the Lieutenant Governor, and the Secretary of State. So,
Thank you, Admiral Healy, and thank you, Governor Moore, for the citation. We're grateful. I'd now like to introduce Archbishop William Lori of the Archdiocese of Baltimore, Your Excellency.
Well, good morning, everybody. It's a great pleasure to be here and to take part in this celebration of the completion of the Brick Chapel. I'd like to greet Bishop Campbell, my dear brother bishop, and my neighbor, Auxiliary Bishop of Washington, Father Anton, the superior of the Columbier Jesuit community in Baltimore, Father Dave Bobian, the pastor of St. Aloysius, Father Jim Bors, who brought me along today, as well as Delegate Morgan and representatives of our distinguished public officials. Especially would like to thank Sheriff Steve Hall. Thank you for unlocking the door, not just for me, but for everybody. It's a beautiful symbolic thing. And Dr. Miller, my goodness, what a friend you are, and how much you love this history. It really is part of your DNA, and where would we be without you? Thank you so much, Dr. Miller. And you know, I couldn't stand here without mentioning also Fred and Beth McCoy. I got to know them way back at the 1984, the 350th anniversary of the state of Maryland. And if you think the weather is unfavorable today, you should have been there back in 1984. It rained cats and dogs, and we did everything we could over there on St. Clement's Island to be as dignified as we could. But I think we all ended up dissolving in laughter. But Beth and Fred have been part of this Brick Chapel project from the very beginning, and we are very indebted to them. God rest them. In the same breath, I'd like to mention my old boss and mentor, James Cardinal Hickey, formerly the Archbishop of Washington. I was with Cardinal Hickey back in 1984 as we slipped and slid around St. Clement's Island, but I was also with him when one Ben Bradley came to his office to introduce the Brick Chapel project to him, and I think not only to ask for his moral support, but if I recall correctly, his financial support as well. And I was with Cardinal Hickey as well when he came here for the exhumation of the lead coffins, and there is photographic evidence that I was actually here. And just to establish another reason for being here, when I was a deacon, not yet a priest, way back in the mid-70s, I preached my first homily at Holy Face Church in Great Mills, right up the road. And the verdict was that they didn't know what the young guy was talking about, but good Lord, he sure did talk pretty. You know, Pope Francis designated the year 2025 as a Jubilee year of hope, a year of prayer and celebration centered on the gift of hope, a year of grace for this wonderful gift to be stirred up in our minds and hearts. I think of Jesuit Father Andrew White and those souls aboard the Ark and the Dove as pilgrims of hope. Those who disembarked on St. Clement's Island, March 25th, 1634. They came in search of something new, a new life, a life of religious freedom, a place where they could practice their faith without fear, and not only themselves, but all those who professed the Trinitarian faith. It was a place to begin a new life for themselves and for their families. Nonetheless, as we've heard this morning already, the struggle for religious freedom would be hard fought. Less than 10 years after those pilgrims came ashore on the land where we now stand, a wooden chapel was constructed, a tangible expression of their hope. Even though it was burnt down in 1645 by hostile forces, those Maryland colonists did not lose hope. In the 1660s, they constructed for themselves a good brick chapel, the first permanent Catholic church in English America. It symbolized, and still does, their enduring hope for religious freedom. We can well imagine the joy of those worshipers as they entered this chapel for the first time in 1667. As the political tides turned in England, so too Maryland's experiment in religious liberty. Religious freedom ceased in Maryland, and the Catholic Church was suppressed and silenced. And in 1704, by order of the royal governor, the brick chapel was locked by the sheriff and was never again to be used for religious purposes. The chapel was dismantled, and its bricks were used to construct the manor house at St. Indigo's. The Jesuits have always been very resourceful. Even so, hopes of those colonists for religious freedom did not die. The penal laws, the loss of their beloved chapel, and other restrictions, none of that resulted in a loss of faith or a loss of hope. Quietly but persistently, the faith was handed on generation after generation. The time of the American Revolution, that idea was alive and well. And such persistence paved the way for the recognition of religious freedom in the founding documents of the United States, especially the Bill of Rights. It could be said that these colonists, these pilgrims of hope, they hoped against hope. With the birth of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, as we heard this morning, came the establishment of the nation's first Roman Catholic diocese, the Diocese of Baltimore, in 1789. Well into this 21st century, we also need to be pilgrims of hope. Then as now, there are those who would suppress religious freedom, those who would seek to privatize religious faith, those who would limit the freedom of religion to freedom of worship, but not the freedom to put into practice in ministries and apostolates of service the faith that is professed. Religious freedom is a beautiful gift of God. It is also an American value that recognizes the role of all religions in their diversity in a free society, and the contribution which religions in their diversity make to the common good. It is a great gift, but religious freedom, like all of our rights, is fragile. It can be eroded little by little. So, with the same persevering hope as those early Maryland colonists, we must seek to preserve this God-given right, not only for ourselves, but also for all of our fellow citizens and for those generations that will come after us. Let the unlocking of this chapel and our entry into its interior be for us an expression of hope, hope for the endurance of religious liberty now and always. Thank you for the privilege of taking part in these festivities, and may God bless us and keep us always in his love. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those wonderful words. We're hearing some refrains here, some themes that are repeating, and it's wonderful to see all of these thoughts articulated so fluently. I'd also like to introduce to the stage Bishop Roy Campbell of the Archdiocese of Washington.
Good morning, everyone. I'd like to first thank Dr. Miller, Dr. Seidel, Father Anton, and even though he's not here, who has done so much in this restoration project, Congressman Steny Hoyer, and Admiral Healy, thank you for your remarks. Archbishop Lori, thank you. And he will come up, Delegate Morgan, and my brother priest, Father Bobian, and others. And Sheriff, I wasn't here to see you unlock the door, but thank you for doing that, okay? And I also would like to thank all of you, because all of you are distinguished guests at this interior opening. I want to say thanks for the invitation to be here for this truly historic opening and of the reconstructed brick chapel, and allowing me to make just a few remarks. This brick chapel, reconstructed on the site of the original brick chapel about 360 years ago, I don't believe is here to bring back the memories of a long ago time, but to remind us of the struggles of people who sought to live their human dignity, thanking and worshiping their God in the religion that they were baptized in, believed in, and lived in their daily lives. This reconstructed chapel reminds us of those who sought to follow their Lord, their Savior, their God, even if it meant traveling from their homes in England to a new and uncharted land. Led by the family of Lord Baltimore, who themselves, this family was Catholic, and Father Andrew White, the first Jesuit priest to bring them here. These pilgrims wished to exercise their religious freedom that all people should have the right to exercise. Although these pilgrims and their descendants were not perfect, they strove to live their Catholic religion in a new land where they were not readily accepted. Unfortunately, even some of them and or their descendants fell victim to not accept others as equal to the same human dignity that they sought to have, enslaving people, some of whom very well are buried outside the walls of this chapel, who did not look like them because of the color of their skin or the country from where they came. This is a part of the history of the land that became the United States of America, and you, Dr. Miller, and your team have worked tirelessly to uncover this history. This gives us the opportunity to not only reflect on the tremendous work you've done here, but to reflect on how we honor these pilgrims' desire for religious freedom by the way we live our lives today, worshiping our God by the way we live with and treat one another, each of us created in our God's image and likeness, the very reason why these pilgrims came to worship their God in their religion. So again, I thank you all for allowing me to be a part of this extraordinary event. And may God bless us in our continuing work in this area and for this purpose, to honor those who gave so much so that we can live in the land we live in today. Thank you.
And now I'd like to introduce Delegate Todd Morgan, who has been so helpful both in Annapolis and also as a donor to this project.
So one thing about speaking and batting cleanup is the microphones generally do not get to my face. It's truly an honor to stand here to see everybody here today. I've been blessed to be on the commission and the foundation probably over 20 years, and I've heard and watched a lot of the evolution of what's gone on around here. If you think about the Beatles, the long and winding road, and how we got here over time, and some of the names here on the board who I remember, and they're probably up there watching down at us right now going, I can't believe we're standing here. But I think as Henry and everyone has pointed out, the historical significance of this chapel are tremendous. I remember 1984 in the pouring down rain and watching, I was teaching at the college and we had a good time over here watching the celebration of the 350th. I remember in 2009 hoisting with Pete Himmelhaber the cross up there on a beautiful and sunny day. Sheriff Cameron opening the door and Sheriff Hall getting skunked today because of the rain. But truly the evolution here has really been remarkable. Jimmy, the bricks. If you think about when we making the bricks came from the clay over in Virginia, handmade. If you think about the mortar here, you're gonna put up Quikrete and had this thing built in a week. But we took time to take the oyster shell and mash it all together and make it work so you can only do 2 or 3 courses at a time. So it had to dry. And if you remember watching the show of, who was it? It was Roger Hill and who was the other? His compatriot in crime. Marty Sullivan. The show that they would put on for the little kids. They would come down here and they would mix the mortar together and watch the kids get to play in it. But it's truly an evolution. It's great to be here. And let's not forget, we had the 350th in 1984, and we're working diligently toward the 400th anniversary that will be celebrated here with our 400th anniversary. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being here. I hope you all have a good time. Sorry it's raining, but some things God just has a reason. He blesses the chapel with the rain. So thank you.
Thank you, Delegate Morgan. It rained so that we would all be together in this place rather than out in that tent. In his remarks, Dr. Miller mentioned the fact that over 1,000 donors contributed to this project. Individuals, foundations, organizations. It was really a remarkable groundswell of support, and I can't tell you how grateful we are. I also want to recognize, however, a few others who have helped in so many ways. In case it escaped your notice, we have quite a few members of the clergy with us here today, which is befitting for this event. You've already met Archbishop Lori, Bishop Campbell, and Father Anton. We also have Father Augustine, Patrick Augustine of St. Cecilia's Catholic Church here in St. Mary City. Reverend Charity Hum of Trinity Episcopal Church, also in St. Mary City. Reverend David Beaubien and Reverend James Boris. We really appreciate you being with us this morning and helping us to commemorate this event. Thank you. There are people with us today who are still making a huge difference in everything that we do, helping us to fulfill our mission. And I want to take a moment to recognize them. We are an independent state agency. We are overseen by a commission, essentially a board of directors, appointed by the governor. And commissioners who are here today include Chair Admiral Tim Healy, our Vice Chair Bonnie Green, Rosemary Hinkle, Hess Stinson, and Judy Filius. And Judy is also a representative from St. Mary's College of Maryland, which is one of our most valued partners and neighbors, and we couldn't do what we do without them. We have a foundation, the Historic St. Mary City Foundation, and from that board we have with us Bob Simmons, Bert Kummerow, a previous executive director of Historic St. Mary City, and John McAllister. These 8 people and their colleagues who are unable to attend give huge amounts of time. They lend their expertise and counsel, and they support what we do. thank you all for everything that you do on our behalf every day. It really means a huge amount to us. We also couldn't do what we do without support of our legislative representatives. And Delegate Morgan, thank you for all you've done for us. Former Congressman Roy Dyson, I think, is with us. I know that Senator Jack Bailey and Delegate Brian Crosby had prior commitments, or they would have been with us. But again, thanks to all of them, we're able to keep the wheels turning and keep things moving. No state agency is a lone wolf. We have to work with our sister agencies to make things happen. We're very pleased to have with us this morning Elaine Bachman, who is the state archivist. The state archives have long been a partner to Historic St. Mary's City. Also in the crowd is Karen Stone of St. Mary's County Museums. And then when you look at the grounds around here, as you walked in here, if you could avoid the rain, if you look at the ghost frame buildings, if you look at the reconstructed buildings, of which this is only one, our infrastructure such as utilities that are often buried, the pathways, the fences, we have to work very closely with other state agencies such as the Department of Budget Management and especially DGS, the Department of General Services. With us this morning from DGS is Marilyn Merlot, Regional Manager for Design, Construction, and Energy. Marilyn, thank you for all that you do along with your colleagues for us. It's really a privilege for us to work with you. You hear all these stories about state government and inefficiencies and the like. I have to tell you, it's been an eye-opener for me. These people work tirelessly and professionally to get the job done. And in the same vein, I want to echo Dr. Miller's comments and recognize Sue Davis and Lisa and their crew from S.E. Davis for the amazing work on this interior. They went way above and beyond, got the work done ahead of schedule on a very challenging timeline, and the workmanship, I think, as you can see, is phenomenal. Henry stole my thunder. I wanted to tell you about this exciting project that will premiere in June, which is the film that is going to be coming out. The filming was completed last weekend, and Mark Letzer, one of the principals of that project, is here with us today. Mark, you and your colleagues, Jay Griswold and Drew Perkins, are spearheading a really visionary project. We've been excited to contribute to it, and this film, which is destined for PBS and hopefully BBC, will be enormously important in raising awareness of Maryland's unique founding. As Henry said, this is kind of a vacuum, and it's hard to fathom why this has not been accorded the recognition that it truly deserves. And that's especially important as we approach 2034, the state's 400th anniversary. Any of you who know me know that this is my mantra. I beat this drum every opportunity I get, and I'll make my pitch to you right now because we have lots to do and we desperately need your help in preparing for this 400th anniversary. This is our opportunity to spread awareness of Maryland, of the amazing ideas that undergirded its foundation, and to fulfill the enormous potential of this historic site, St. Mary's City. We will need broad-based support in planning and in fundraising and in execution to realize that potential. But it's one of those moments that comes along not even once in a lifetime. So we really have to do our best to make the most of it, and we're going to need your help to do that. I'm shameless in asking for help, and I hope all of you will lend your shoulders to the wheel and help us get there in 2034 in the style that this place deserves. So we've gone on through a very long list of people who have contributed to making this place work. We have with us also quite a few people here who have won Historic St. Mary's City most prestigious award, the Cross Botany. You'll see the ribbons around their necks. I'm painfully aware that there are many people who have contributed to this work. If I did not mention your name, please know that it in no way diminishes our gratitude. Thank you all. We simply couldn't do what we do. We couldn't open our door to thousands of people, and especially kids, every year without you. So again, thank you so much for coming. We really do appreciate it, and have a wonderful afternoon.